The meeting's being filmed, and by being present, attendees are deemed to have agreed to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. I can advise that attendees should not disclose any personal information of individuals, as this would infringe the data protection rights of that individual. Please, as well, if you could mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Leslie Fage, Councillor North, Councillor Pullinger, Councillor Ramsey, and Councillor Woodhead may be late. He's not here. Yes, he may be late. I didn't mean to say Brown. What did I say? Did I say Councillor Brown may be late? Sorry. Right, okay, right. We're going to go through this again. Item 1, we'll start again. Item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Leslie Fage, Councillor North, Councillor Pullinger, Councillor Ramsey, and Councillor Woodhead may be late. Councillor Brown is very much here. Item 2, declarations of interest. Receive statutory declarations of interest from members in relation to, firstly, pecuniary interests and then non-pecuniary interests. So does anybody have a pecuniary interest? No. Anyone have any non-pecuniary interests? Also no. Okay, I move on. Item 3, Town Mayor's announcements. I have several announcements. So a number of members will be aware that last week we sadly lost Councillor Tim Woodward, who served as Mayor of Biggleswade from 2011 to 2013 and was a member of the council, I believe, for several years before that and after. He was also a serving Biggleswade ward councillor for Biggleswade South up until 2019. Could I ask, please, that members, if you're able to stand, and we'll share a moment's silence in remembrance of Councillor Woodward, please. Thank you, everybody. On the 3rd of March, I attended the Dunstable Civic Service at the Salvation Army Church in Dunstable, which was a little bit of a change. It was a lovely service with a wonderful brass band, and one of the great joys of attending all these civic services is that I pick up lots of ideas for my civic service, but unfortunately it was a little late to implement a brass band for mine, but they were very, very good. And it was a very well attended event as well, with a rock choir who are becoming a bit of a regular feature at civic services. So that was the 3rd of March. On the 4th of March, I opened the new shop in town, Willow, which is a charity shop for the Willow Foundation, founded by Bob Wilson after the death of his daughter. Again, it was a real pleasure to open their 6th store, and to see how beautifully decorated it is in a very prominent position on the high street. I have no doubt it will be very well supported by the community, and those who are working and volunteering in it are certainly very keen to be here in Biggleswade, their first store in Bedfordshire. On the 5th of March, I attended the Sandy Civic Service hosted by the Reverend Hugh there. It was his last civic service in Sandy, but again, very well attended by mayors from across the county. Another good opportunity to discuss topical matters across that are relevant to Central Bedfordshire, Bedford Borough and Luton and elsewhere. On the 12th of March, so the Sunday just gone, I attended my own civic service at St Andrew's Church. So thank you to those of you who were able to come along. It was a very pleasant occasion. And we had an address from the Bishop of Bedford, which a lot of the other mayors wondered how we managed to get him, but he was delighted to come along and to preach to us. So thank you to everybody who joined us, and for others in the community from community groups and elsewhere. I can confirm by the number of sausage rolls left at the end that we got about the number of people that we were expecting, which was in and around 200, which is absolutely super. final Mayor's announcement. This Friday at midday, we are hosting the Commonwealth War Graves Commission a plaque unveiling ceremony. This is going to be on the Rowan Crescent entrance to the Drove Road Cemetery. So if you're able to attend, you are most welcome. There will be a few of us there, and it's obviously in to some extent memory, but also pleased that we can commemorate properly those who have particular graves in our cemetery. So it should be quite a nice service if you are available. Councillor Russell, do you have any announcements?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, then I will move on. Item 4, public open session to adjourn for a period of up to 15 minutes to allow members of the public to put questions or to address the council through the chairman pertaining to matters on the agenda. Each speaker will give their name to the chairman prior to speaking, which will be recorded in the minutes unless requested otherwise. Each speaker will have 1 3-minute slot. So we have a member of the public in the chamber. Do you wish to address the council? Yes. You do. Okay. Would you like to come to the microphone, which is just next to you, and 3 minutes?
Yeah, my name is Andrew Skilton. It's pertaining to item 10F on the agenda, which is the proposed mast on land adjacent to Burnham Road. I noticed that some of the councillors on social media had expressed their support for this in relation to potentially hindering the development land north, which the town council was opposed, and which we do thank you for. And I'd just like to, when you discuss that, clarity on why you think that mast might hinder that. From a personal point of view, and speaking to some of my neighbours, I feel it doesn't feel right that a mast, which will quite obviously disbenefit the residents of Northfield and Winston Crescent, because it will take away the amenity land that is that triangle of land, which is well used by dog walkers and children to play football. We do have some quite wide verges in Winston Crescent, but they're not suitable for football, and it just feels that using amenity land to sort of, which is a definite disbenefit to the residents, to stop a development which is sort of a notional benefit, is, an application should be taken on their own merits. And to say, I want just to say that the residents of Winston Crescent, lots of live in small properties with no gardens, and that is important for many land. That should be considered in any response that the town council makes. And last they do that, and I just say I'm not getting to the margin principle. Phone signal isn't great in Biggleswade, but in its current location, I think taking that amenity land away is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skilton. Members have heard what you've said and will, I'm sure, respond to that in due course when we get on to item 10F. Do we have anybody online? We have one person. If that one person wishes to speak, if you raise your virtual hand. No, I'll carry on. Item 5, invited speaker. We don't have an invited speaker. Item 6, members' questions. Do any members have any questions? No members' questions, okay. Item 7, minutes and recommendations of meetings. For members to receive the minutes of the Town Council meeting, which was held on Tuesday, the 28th of February. So we're going to go through these twice, firstly for accuracy, then we'll take them for matters arising. So I'm on page 8 of the pack. Are there any accuracy issues on page 8? No. Page 9, Councillor Alban.
In item 6, members' questions, I believe I raised the issue of footpath closures on the common, which is actually on the agenda this evening.
Yes, I think you did, didn't you? Okay, we'll need to add that in if that's okay, please. Anything else on page 9? Page 10? Page 11? Page 12? Page 13? No. So subject to that change, are we happy that this is an accurate record of the meeting? Yes? Thank you. Item 8, matters arising. So we're going through same set of minutes for matters arising. So any matters arising on page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Councillor Strawn?
Yes, item 8, the Ivor Medical Centre and the meeting that is hoped to be taking place with regard to the health situation in the town. Has a meeting been organised yet, please?
Corinne?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we've been in touch with both the ICB and with the MP's private office, and they've now responded in turn. So the MP is available mid to late April for sure. And we're trying to slot a date in. But in the meantime, we've had a response back from the ICB lead, who's been telling us that due to PERDA, she is of the impression that this cannot be discussed with health, anything that would come up essentially at that meeting. And she will go back to her her management and then sort of come back. And that was due to be coming back to us this week. So in due course this week, we'll have a response from the ICB.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Russell, you wish to comment?
Well, I received an email today that tells me that there will be another meeting of the patient group of the Ivor Medical Centre on the 13th of April, when Dr. Hartree hopes to reveal who will take over running the practice. So it's no good meeting in late April because the decision will be made by then. And the chairman of the patient group previously told me a few days ago that there is a process where they interview any possible people who might take over. And he requested that a member of the patient group should be either on the panel or at least an observer. And no, that's not going to happen. There will be somebody from Health Watch, and otherwise it will be the ICB. So it feels as if Biggleswade people are being very much held at arm's length, not only the members of the patient group, but obviously now also the town council from the responses that are coming back. So if Dr. Hartree reckons she can reveal all on the 13th of April, we're probably going to have to wait till then.
Thank you. Councillor Strawn, did you want to respond?
Yes, well, in view of the comments about PERDA, which I can understand and not helpful to the process in this instance, but perhaps the clerk can make a note of that so that the new council will have an opportunity of raising this in a meeting and obtaining clarity, not only the Ivor Medical Centre, but also on the Health Hub, because I think that's something that the new council will be interested in.
Thank you. Yes, I think you're right. So if we can make a note of that and hope to meet, if it looks like we're going to have to wait till after the 13th of April anyway, it should be very soon in the new council. Although I would just note that issues related to PERDA are not something the ICB would normally involve themselves in. So that would be something for us to worry about. So thank you for the concern. Where were we? We're on page 10. Any further matters arising on page 10? No. Page 11? Page 12, page 13. No further matters arising. Okay. Items for consideration. So we're on to item 9. So 9A, design guide topics. For members to receive and consider 2 planning guidance documents on design guide and housing policy technical guidance supplementary planning documents. So these are from Central Bedfordshire. And they are consulting. We've had a bit of time to consider a response. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Well, I've spent some time going through these documents, and my major concern was whether there was any conflict with the neighbourhood plan that we've just had made. Quickly going through it, sustainable development enabling growth, nothing in the design guide contradicts it, nor on Biggleswade Town Centre. On employment and community facilities, nothing in the design guide conflicts, but it only talks about mixed-use development, which would include community provision and large buildings in town centres, so nothing really about employment. The neighbourhood plan requires front courts or gardens to separate houses from the highway for amenity and safety. The design guide merely says that parking should be a minimum of 1.5 metres from windows. That may be relevant for flats, but it's proved to be problematic for some of the housing in East Biggleswade. The green infrastructure, nothing to conflict, but the design guide does go into very much more detail about biodiversity and green infrastructure. It encourages woodland, which supports our aspiration for woodland along the edge of the common. And it does list suitable native planting for the Ivor Valley, which I think is a good thing. On footpaths and rights of way, it suggests that a development may be refused, quote, by a failure to properly integrate public rights of way. It says any diversion or change to a public right-of-way will need to provide an improvement over the existing path and should avoid being incorporated into estate road footways, and wherever possible should be incorporated into the development as a positive feature for leisure use and active travel. And the guide also refers to the need to adhere to our famous LTN 120. Sustainable design, the neighbourhood plan covers most of the issues in the design guide, but the guide goes into much more detail and there's no conflict on that. Shop fronts, the neighbourhood plan goes into more detail, looking at shop fronts in a conservation area, but what is in the design guide is supportive of our views on shop fronts. House extensions, the design guide addresses the loss of amenity space and requires that any extension should not take up more than half the garden space. It also requires that the remaining parking should be in line with the parking standards for new developments, which I think would help us in a number of the applications that we get for extensions. Again, no conflict with the neighbourhood plan. Conservation area guidelines at paragraphs 532 and on complement the neighbourhood plan. No conflict on local heritage. On scheduled monuments, the design guide requires an archaeological heritage statement for development near to scheduled monuments. The neighbourhood plan says that development should not harm scheduled monuments and should try to enhance their setting. So again, they're complementary. On sustainable transport, the guide states that parking courts should be a last resort, but does not ban them altogether. This is in line with the neighbourhood plan. There may be the odd occasion when a parking court is unavoidable. The design guide's proposals for surface treatments for highways and footways are good. And it also reinforces what the neighbourhood plan says about turning circles for service vehicles, which again is good. On sports and allotments, there's no conflict at all. Just a few points that I think it's interesting for council to note. So the guide says that cyclists must be physically separated and protected from high volume motor traffic and treated as vehicles, not pedestrians. Both pedestrians and cyclists should be accommodated on infrastructure appropriate for the intended use, route, context and connections. But then it says for low order streets with minimal traffic and low speeds up to 20 miles an hour, then cyclists are able to mix with vehicle traffic. And this is our problem on Furzen Hall Road, of course, which that doesn't help. It then goes on to say where a cycle track borders a heavily trafficked road, it should be separated from the carriageway by a verge or hard shoulder as per LTN 120. But I'm not sure that we can say that Furzen Hall is heavily trafficked in that context, although it may be if there are another 400 houses built. And of course, both of those statements rely on the interpretation of the officers, the planning officers. And it says, where a cycle track is provided adjacent to a footway, this should be segregated by means of a curb and ideally a change in level. That worries me because I think it could be a trip hazard and also not good for cyclists if they suddenly go down an edge. And it reiterates that buses require a minimum carriageway width of 6.5 metres to allow buses to pass each other safely. It says that planning permission is required for demolition in a conservation area and for insertion of dormer windows and cladding or rendering the building exterior. It also states that some permitted development rights have been removed from residential properties located within the conservation areas, but it doesn't give any detail of that, and it's something I think we need to find out more about. I raised, there was a topic session, an online discussion about this that I attended, and in the topic session, it was said that Article 4 directions, which we've been talking about trying to get a direction for our conservation area, it said that Article 4 directions are not straightforward and that similar protection is given by the design guide. So again, I think that's something that we need to compare in the future and if necessary, still apply for an Article 4 direction. And interestingly, the guide suggests that since single garages do not count now as parking provision in new developments, they could be made smaller, recognising that people use them for storage. I'm not sure about the smaller, but at least that's a recognition that most people don't use a single garage now. And then on open spaces, there's a great deal of detail on all types of public open spaces, formal and informal recreation areas, children's play areas, playing pitches, allotments, cemeteries, but it says refer to the CBC leisure strategy for more detail. Regarding new allotments, it says that professional soil testing advice should be sought to check the suitability of land, and if necessary, sub and topsoil should be imported. And then on cemeteries, it says they're seen as having value for the provision of green space, the promotion of wildlife conservation and biodiversity. And the guide says that developers should work with parish councils to develop a burial ground, and that it should comply with Environment Agency requirements and the CBC leisure strategy. That's something to bear in mind as and when we need a new cemetery. And there's a great load of detail about the different levels of play areas, laps, leaps and neeps. But I think that if the town council is going to take over play areas in future developments, we need to be careful at the planning stage, since some of the existing play areas, particularly the laps, which are local areas for play, are not well used. Otherwise, the leaps are locally equipped areas for play and the neeps are neighbourhood equipped areas for play. So having gone through all of that, there's then the other document is the housing policy technical guidance. It doesn't impinge on the neighbourhood plan at all, but should we get to the stage of revising the neighbourhood plan, we'll need to consider the national first homes policy and also the possibilities of self-build and custom housing. So again, something for the future. The technical guidance is fairly straightforward. It stipulates the mix of housing, requires that housing conforms to national space standards, which is good, and it encourages the provision of bungalows. It notes that over the last 7 years, only 356 bungalows have been built in central Bedfordshire. It states that there should be no age restriction for occupants of bungalows, because some developments elsewhere have limited bungalow sale to over 55s. So it requires that developments of 100 dwellings or more provide bungalows, level access accommodation or low density flats for older people, again, which we do need in the town. And it encourages something called customisation, where the initial purchaser of a property buying it off of plan can have a choice of the number of bedrooms, whether it's an open plan kitchen and dining room or separate rooms, whether they need bigger rooms or more storage options, and where the internal walls should go. So that's an interesting concept. But the guidance also encourages the development of these 20-minute neighbourhoods, where key services such as GPs and post offices are within a 10 to 20-minute walk. That could be more problematic with some of the developments. So having gone through some of that stuff, I've circulated to colleagues what I think the response to the consultation should include, and it's open for colleagues to say what they feel and whether I've got it right or wrong. But I think we should welcome the design guide supporting the local plan. It requires high quality design and reinforcing local distinctiveness, and it talks about the different areas within central Bedfordshire, geographic and green infrastructure areas, and it asks for the efficient use of land. The reference to the neighbourhood plan is less clear. The guide simply says that policies should be taken into consideration. And then at the topic session, it was said that neighbourhood plans sit alongside the MPPF and the local plan. The inference being that in any conflict with the design guide, the neighbourhood plan would take precedence. That wasn't confirmed in the notes of the topic session that was circulated, and I queried it with the person who sent out the notes, and I haven't had any response. So I think we should say that the town council would expect the neighbourhood plan to take precedence. And each section of the design guide has got a whole long list, 20 to 30 documents that are to be referenced. And it's not clear whether there's any conflict between the guide and those documents, and if so, which takes precedence. So there's all sorts of confusion possible there. And as I mentioned earlier, in many cases, good design is advocated, but the guide goes on to allow exceptions. In some cases, the parameters of a particular site may force exceptions, but it would be hoped that that would be unusual. Otherwise, outcomes are fully dependent on the interpretation of the guidance by developers, planning officers, and the DMC. I've said we should welcome the emphasis on woodland and planting native to the area. About the trip hazard on cycle footways, I think we should say that it would be better to delineate the areas through paving or contrasting surfaces. And about the laps, leaps and neeps, I think we know that some laps are hardly ever used. I know of one in particular that's never used. And it's because many parents prefer a larger play area with equipment for both young children, separated from that for older children, but where a parent can supervise both children. One of the case studies at the end of the design guide is King's Reach. So I think we should say that that case study actually only refers to the green infrastructure on King's Reach, but it should be noted that much of the rest of the estate design is problematic and would not conform to the policies set out in the Biggleswade neighbourhood plan or the design guide. I think we need to make that point. I think we should welcome the housing policy technical guidance. It does provide interpretation and implementation of housing policies in the local plan. And then it goes on to say, and this is a quote from the technical guidance, that the local plan is the development plan for Central Bedfordshire, along with the made neighbourhood plans within the area. So although the design guide doesn't say exactly that, at least the housing policy technical guidance recognises where the neighbourhood plan sits in the hierarchy. So you've got national planning policy guidance, local plan, and then neighbourhood plan, and then everything else, which is supplementary planning guidance, which is good to know. I've mentioned bungalows, and I think that's great. It helps older people to downsize but remain fully independent. And it also provides accommodation for younger people who are less able. And then welcoming the national space standards together with this idea of initial purchasers having more choice over the internal layout, which would mean that, you know, you may have a street of houses, but they'd not all actually be the same house inside, although they probably would be on the outside. So I'm sorry to have gone on for a long while, but my proposal is that we should respond to the consultation, making the points that are on the papers that I've circulated to colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there a seconder for that proposal? Yes, there are seconders. Any comments, colleagues? Councillor Strawn.
Yes, firstly, thank you to Councillor Russell for the incredible amount of time she must have spent on going through this to produce that report. Particularly interested in the idea of small garages being made smaller. The reason they can't use at present is they're not big enough, so they really need to be made bigger if we're ever going to get cars in them. So that's interesting. But the one observation I would make, I noticed there seems to be a little bit of ambivalence over the precedence of the neighbourhood local plans, not just for Biggleswade, but for the area, all towns and villages through the town. And so I was just wondering whether Councillor Russell would consider adding as a conclusion to her report that Biggleswade Town Council welcomes these guides and policies, subject to it being made clear that in Biggleswade and in other areas, the neighbourhood local plans take precedence.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Councillor Russell, that sounds a bit like an amendment to the document you've put forward. Are you comfortable with that last sentence going on?
I'm quite happy. I've taken down the basis of it, and that could go at the end, yes.
Okay, thank you. Is the seconder happy with that, Councillor Knight? Yes. Any further comments, Councillor Bond?
I'll just clarify the fact is it takes precedence because it was made later. That's what my understanding is.
Okay, but I think it's more to do with the hierarchy. Councillor Russell.
Yeah, it's Councillor Bond's right that it was made later than the local plan, but when we go on to having the local plan revised, it will still be the neighbourhood plan will still be the third level of reference before you get to all these supplementary planning documents.
Thank you. Councillor Strawn.
Make an observation. One of the reasons I put the suggestion in is that, yes, that this later one would obviously take precedence unless it states to the contrary.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Foster.
Councillor Russell always enjoys my my contributions because there's always a but. So I'm going to do a but, Councillor Russell. I welcome as others have said, the immense amount of work you've done on this. With that in mind, there are a couple of things that within the paper here, so at the topic session, which may well be relevant, but I'm not sure it's absolutely necessary to be within the consultation response. And the bit about this was not confirmed at the meeting notes, and the query about this has received no response. Again, I'm not sure whether that's completely necessary within the reply, but I'll leave that to you to whether you feel that's necessary or not. The main thing in terms of the bit about the play area, I completely agree with the sentiment. The fact that we need to be clear what sort of types of green spaces and play areas are actually provided. If there's no equipment, generally speaking, they're not going to be used. How do we word that in a way that is a positive change rather than it being a sort of a criticism of what the plan is? So the sentiment's the same, but it's almost like it's saying needs to be sensitive, like to likely demand. It's sort of focus on the usage. So it's more of a language thing than anything else. I'm probably explaining myself very clearly here, but that sounds like a criticism, and I think it needs to be a sort of a positive. So we have to focus on the benefits of these rather than the criticism of not having them. Perhaps I'm not explaining myself very clearly here.
I think that's clear.
And the bit about the town council's noted that labs which are hardly ever used, is that a sentiment that everyone agrees with, or is that individual ones? I think that's a pretty generic statement, and I think we need perhaps to be a little bit more precise on that, or not have it in there. I completely agree about it with the larger play equipment and the having the separation, but I'm not sure about that part of it.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Russell, do you want to respond?
Yes. I don't think we should be going into a lot of detail about the play areas in Biggleswade as they are at the moment, but I happen to know of one lap where neither I nor my daughter, who lives opposite it, have seen anybody using it. And yet it's a play area that we've adopted as a town council. It's not within the King's Reach development, it's an older development. And we're maintaining something that's never used, which is why, but I was trying to be careful with the wording, because a lap, whether even if it hasn't got a lot of play equipment, maybe just one or two tiniest things, the little spring things that they use. If it's next to a block of flats and people have got no outside space, then it may be used. But so I was trying to word it in a sense to say, that's why I'm saying we have to be sensitive to likely demand, because next to a block of flats, it may be used. But in the one I'm thinking about is mainly detached and semi-detached houses, and therefore not used. So that's why what I was trying to get across. I mean, I'm quite happy to look and see if it could be worded slightly differently. But I think the point of parents preferring a larger play area, it's like what we're doing at Franklin's at the moment. So the areas are graded. There's sort of 3 separate areas of Franklin's, sort of the tiddlies, the bit older, and then the older still. But one parent can still keep an eye on 2 or 3 children because it's all together in one area. Whereas if you've got, you know, a lap here and a leap there and a neep somewhere else, they can't be in the different places for the different ages of children. That's what I was trying to get across.
Sorry, Councillor Foster. Yeah,
I come back to, I completely agree with you, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I just think, just as an example of things that probably aren't correct in some other developments. Where I live I live in Sorrel Way in Cherwell Close. So these and on the Herbs Estate, so these sort of areas that are basically a tarmacked surface that are of no benefit to man or beast. And I think there's no point having them there if they're not going to be equipped in some way. So I think it's actually, if they're going to, there needs to be some equipment rather than just an empty space, is what I was trying to get to.
Okay. Yes. Councillor Frank Foster.
Perhaps rather than hardly ever used, it could be sometimes underused, less definitive.
Okay. Should we look to summarise this proposal then? Because there's been quite a bit of feedback. Councillor Strawn has put an amendment which has been accepted. So the wording is very similar, or is as it is in front of us, and as was summarised a moment ago, with a sentence at the bottom, correct me if I'm wrong, a final sentence saying that we do want to get that clarity over where some of this, where the design guide particularly sits in the hierarchy. Am I right in thinking that was the real question mark? Plus then perhaps softening some of the wording over play areas to see if we can put a slightly positive spin on it, because there is some good content in there. Is that fair, or do you want to summarise, Councillor Russell?
I took from Councillor Strawn that BTC welcomes the two documents, subject to being clear that the neighbourhood plan takes precedence. And the other thing was that to take out the sentence about not being confirmed in the meeting notes and just saying the inference being that in any conflict with the design guide, the neighbourhood plan would take precedence. The town council would certainly expect, I think we need to put in there, the neighbourhood plan to take precedence. It's a bit repetitive, but it's just keep making the point.
Okay. Councillor Foster, with your microphone.
Just a spelling, a typo, Councillor Ross. I'm sure you've picked up on it.
Where? Tell me what's wrong.
Hierarchy.
Oh, right.
Ooh. Unlucky. Okay, good spot. Okay. So are we clear on what the proposal is? And I presume, Councillor Russell, you're happy just to add some of that in and provide it to officers so that they have a clean document to send to central beds on headed paper. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. So anybody unclear on the proposal? No, good. All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's everybody. Can we also minute, I think, our thanks to Councillor Russell, who went into a huge amount of detail there on what was a very important consultation for the town. So thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Russell?
May I just add that I'm happy to circulate my notes to colleagues so that you have the points that we need to look into in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item 9B, land north of Lindsell's level crossing, for members to receive and consider Central Bedfordshire Council's decision. I think we can probably just note this because the decision is made. There's really nothing for this council to be consulted on unless there's any qualms over that. No, I'll move on. 9C, Biggleswade Baptist Church workshop request for members to receive and consider a letter from Biggleswade Baptist Church. So this is related to an application I think they're putting in for the wind farm panel. If I might just say from the chair, in terms of this council's responsibility, if I'm not mistaken, we don't recommend things to the wind farm panel. Community groups put themselves forward for it, and some of our members have representation on that panel. So in terms of what we're being asked to consider here, we need to be very careful how we respond. I would just note that we do have our own grants process, but let's hear comments. Councillor Alban. Oh, sorry, your hand's up like this, Councillor Alban.
But I mean, they're asking us to endorse it rather than anything else. I can't see any harm in us endorsing it.
Okay, is that a proposal? Councillor Foster?
I'd also be quite happy to endorse it. It seems a very commendable thing to be doing.
Fine. Okay. I'm looking for, are we going with a proposal to endorse it then? Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is any action taken off the back of that endorsement, or is it merely a verbal endorsement? Councillor Foster?
I think it's a verbal endorsement that we encourage and we hope it goes ahead.
Okay, a verbal endorsement. Is there a seconder for a verbal endorsement? There is a seconder for a verbal endorsement. Are there any further comments on this? No. So all those in favour of verbally endorsing? That's just about everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I have actually seen part of this initiative when I was at the Baptist Church for, it was the Biggleswade Good Neighbours receiving the Lord Lieutenant's award for their work during the pandemic, and some of those at the Baptist Church showed me what they do, and it really is a really exciting initiative. So I think we can endorse it. Item 9D, Biggleswade substation, for members to consider meeting correspondence. I think this can probably be noted as it's actually in the diary. Is that okay? Just note that. Item 9E, Anglia Water proposed works for members to receive and consider a written report by the Deputy Administration and HR Manager. Sian, hello. Is there anything you'd like to add or update us on this report, Sian?
So, good evening, councillors. Following the report that was issued, we had a further email from Anglian Water letting us know that should the proposal be approved, there would be a carriageway lane closure to Dells Lane adjacent to the Spinney with a 3-way traffic light system in place during the trial excavation and the PRV excavation, a total of 15 working days. So that's additional information received post-report.
Thank you, Sian. Comments, councillors? Councillor Alban?
Yeah, this should improve water pressure for quite a few houses in the town. So I think it would be, and it seems to be the last site that's available, that's workable. So I think we shouldn't oppose it. But I do note that the contractor has suggested that they will provide a goodwill remuneration of about £200 for landscaping. I don't think £200 would go very far, although they apparently don't have to give anything. But it'd be quite nice to see a larger sum than that for some decent landscaping.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. So is that a proposal is that a proposal that we accept the recommendation to go ahead, but we'd like to see a bit more landscaping potential?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Yes, there are seconders. Any further comments? Councillor Russell? Thank you, Councillor Swan.
I wonder whether we could add to the proposal that we are disappointed that it's going to take 15 working days to do the necessary work on a busy road. Just as a comment.
Do you want to, Councillor, sorry, I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Alban. Sorry, Sian, did you want to update on that?
Yes, I'd like to just clarify that those are not consecutive days. Those are split up across 2 periods. So the trial excavation would be 5 working days, and then separated by a design and procurement period of 6 to 8 weeks, and then the PRV installation of 10 working days.
Okay. Thank you. So it is, Councillor Alban, you were nodding when Councillor Russell spoke. Were you happy to add that or not? It's your proposal.
Yeah, I'd be happy for that to be.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Strawn?
It's a good question. This appears to be dealt with on our land, therefore it is interfering with our land. Shouldn't we be granting an easement or way leave consent for them to have their equipment on our land to do this? I'm not against the principle of what they're trying to do, but just from a technical point of view, shouldn't there be some kind of legal agreement that it's there rather than just being plonked there at the whim of the board? They may have the powers to do so, but it's a question I'm not sure of the answer, but it's just struck me that there would normally be some kind of legal agreement for that. We've had it with phone masts as one of the better, amongst other things. Mm-hmm. You have way leave consents for electricity lines, etc. So is it correct that they just can do it and there is no need for any formal legal agreement?
I don't know. Councillor Bond looks like he does so.
I have a little experience with this, only because secondhand of what I've seen done in the past. Anglian Water have amazing powers, even more than the glorious Network Rail. They can do a lot, but actually they still have to pay compensation and actually reinstate. They can't actually get out of that. So it is not unreasonable to expect the landscaping and it all to be put back to our satisfaction. And there will normally be photographs taken before the work starts and photographs taken after it's all completed and all reinstated, and it has to be agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Knight?
just going to add to that. So can we ask that officers do take photographs of the area before any work commences? And yes, in the notes here, that if the value or interest in any land is depreciated by the works, you are entitled to compensation. I'm summarising a bit. And if you can't agree that, you have to go to Lands Tribunal. So yeah, I think we could say we don't agree to £200, given that we're going to have the loss of utility of the area of land, which is going to be concreted over effectively. I think it should be substantially higher. And it does also say here we have the right to get it independently valued, and Anglian Water will pay for that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Knight. So there's been lots of comments. Councillor Alban, do you want to just restate your proposal? You can take on board whatever you wish that colleagues have said.
My proposal is simply that we accept this, but look to increase the landscaping offering that they'd be given above £200, simply because that doesn't do much. I've heard all the other comment, but as far as easements and things are concerned, that just seems a very complex process to go through. So I think I'd rather stick to my proposal with the addition of concern about the number of days that the traffic management will be in place.
Thank you. Okay, and that was. Is there still a seconder for that proposal? Yes, there are. Okay. Further comments, Councillor Bond. Then we're going to look to move to a vote.
I just would like to ask a question, actually, via chair, if Councillor Alban would actually want to quantify the addition rather than saying more than 200, because £201 is more than 200. Does he actually have a figure in mind that he might actually like to suggest?
Yes. How many noughts would you like to add, Councillor Alban?
I don't have a figure, but I would hope that the officers would be able to come up with a reasonable negotiation.
Okay. We have a proposal. We've had plenty of discussion about the proposal, so we're going to move to a vote. The proposal is to accept the recommendations that we allow Anglian Water to go ahead with this small piece of land, but we want to see more landscaping, certainly more than £200 worth would cover. We also express concern at how long Dells Lane will be subject to temporary traffic lights. Is anybody unclear on the proposal? No. All those in favour of the proposal, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you for the detailed report, Sian. I appreciate that things like that are not always easy to put together. So thank you ever so much. A lot of complex things made much simpler there. Item 9F, commemorative plaques, benches and memorials policy update for members to receive and consider a report from the place shaping manager. Isaac, anything to update or explain in a bit more detail here?
Yeah, just a brief one. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
So officers will be using SharePoint for all policies in future, showing track changes, and a final policy version without track changes will be submitted to Town Council meetings for resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments, colleagues? Councillor Strawn?
Yes, thank you. Very helpful to have the track changes, but I do have some concerns, particularly over the insurance side and the excess. We're asking people to pay a considerable sum of money for these benches, and it is not going to be their fault that they get vandalised. We've got insurance which covers some cost over £125, plus the fact I think it is going to be totally and utterly impractical. Someone could donate a bench in memory of a spouse. 2 or 3 years later, they could be dead themselves. So who's going to pay the repairs at that stage? I think that part of it is unreasonable, and I would ask that that particular sentence which is inserted there comes out. The fact we've got insurance, I think we should do it. If we needed to put the cost up so as to reflect the possible repairs, that's a different matter. But I can't actually countenance that particular suggestion. And I note the donation to the Mayor's charities of £100. I'm not sure that that's entirely appropriate, but I'm not going to make a great song and dance about that one. But I do feel very strongly about the insurance point.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Councillor Alban?
Yeah, I was going to pick up on the point about the donation to the mayor's charities. Yeah, I'll make more of a song and dance about it, perhaps. I'd be quite happy for applicants to be sort of encouraged to donate to the mayor's charity, but to make it mandatory, I think is not right. I'm not comfortable with that at all. So I would prefer to see that taken out.
I can't remember at all how that slipped its way in at TCM, if I'm perfectly honest, Councillor Strawn, Councillor Alban. I think that's fair. So we're looking for a proposal, really. Councillor Strawn has mentioned, if Councillor Strawn were making a proposal, it would sound like removing the words everything from, so it's this new insertion, anything from, and if successful, the applicant would only be responsible for paying excess, which currently stands at 125, and then we take out everything and including the word otherwise. So that would mean that we would try to claim back on our insurance. And then also potentially changing the words around the mayor's charities to, or could just take them out altogether. I was literally pushing my luck at TCM. Councillor Russell.
I think we should take out the reference to the mayor's charity, and I think we should take out reference to the 125 and payout of insurance. But a certain churchyard that I know about not far from here, there's a request for a small sum up front to cover maintenance, at least in the first few years. And I wonder if we could do something like that, maybe charge £100 or £200 as a contribution, because it's not only if there's vandalism, it's, you know, if the bench is there 5 years, does it need a cleaning down? Does it need a revarnishing or a whatever? So I'm just throwing in the possibility of making a small upfront charge, in the same way really that on a much larger scale we get given by developers a lump sum when we take on play areas, and this would be on a much smaller scale, obviously.
Okay. We're going to look to get something concrete as a proposal at some point. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. So I think £600 for a plaque seems quite reasonable. But unless I'm missing it, I can't see the price in here for a bench, and I think that needs to be in here. Am I missing it? Sorry?
Yeah, sorry.
Where's that written?
Oh yeah, it's on page
34.
34.
So I am being a fool. Okay, so it is there. Then I guess, can you remind me what the purchase cost of the bench is, please? Because I hope that figure includes the likely maintenance over a reasonable life of that bench. And I think that's the bit I'm looking for.
Yeah, we briefly went over it at TCM how that cost was made up. The cost of the bench itself was £300, and then the cost of maintaining the bench over 15 years was £1,800, assuming 5% inflation, stoning taking place once a year, and the bench being included as part of the usual schedule of work for the public realm team.
Okay, so that would actually, that sort of covers the point that Councillor Russell made to a certain extent, although Councillor Russell was talking more a few £100 rather than the lifetime of the bench. But Councillor Knight, did you want to carry on?
Okay, so I'd missed that figure on the back page, so I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foster, Councillor Frank Foster.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any intention to give people that wish to do this with the bench, to give them any input as to where the bench may be. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be any space for them to say, Uncle Percy liked to sit by the river, it'd be nice to have a bench along there. Is the intention not to have something like that, or how would presumably people will want to have a preference to where it's likely to be placed? I wonder if we intend to do that. So that's the first thing. Perhaps the other thing is a more, just a peculiarity with me, oversaturation. There is currently an oversaturation of furniture. Oversaturation, really?
Where,
Could we say too much?
Is that in the policy? Is that written in the policy? Is that written in the policy? Sorry, Councillor Foster.
It's in the wording here. I just can't get over the word oversaturation.
Oh, right, it's in the report.
Context.
That's okay. No, that's fine. Well, these things are always sort of open to interpretation a little bit. We need to look to get a bit of a proposal here. So Councillor Strawn was next, and I'm going to come to Councillor Russell.
Thank you. And I got so enthusiastic looking at the amendment on the insurance side and the repairs. It says the council cannot accept liability for any vandalism or accidental damage to commemorative features. Fair enough. On such an instance occurring, the applicant will be advised of the cost to repair or replace. Then we've got the, we'll try and claim back the costs through insurance. And then it says it is the applicant's responsibility to agree and fund this work. On the one hand, we're taking into account general repairs, etc., in what we're charging, which is not inconsiderable when looked at £1,600. Shouldn't it be just there that it will be repaired if it's possible, rather than putting an onus on the applicant? I think that is totally and utterly unfair on the applicant. We've taken the good, they've provided something for the town, hopefully that'll be a benefit. Is it really right and proper that they then be expected to deal with the damage? That's something that quite possibly should be dealt with in-house by the public realm team, unless it's something quite complicated, such as replacement of the bench itself. But I just don't think it's right that the applicant can be expected to do these. We've taken it off them, so to speak. It's there for the benefit of the town. If it's not irreparable, it's irreparable. But if it's
sorry, thank you. I think we take the point. We can't make radical amendments to a policy, in my view, in the middle of a council meeting. We're looking at 3 or 4 now, aren't we? Unless somebody wants to make a proposal that this is that we adopt it with some tweaks. I mean, I'm just thinking where this is going. Councillor Russell.
Can I make 2 points? And I agree with you that we need to sort of deal with this offline. And I've also just been trying to work out what we're actually charging people for all this, because the figures are excluding VAT and an individual will not be able to claim VAT back. And, you know, we're looking at a considerable sum of money. We're looking at £3,000 really. So the other thing I wanted to say was, in the famous design guide, they're talking about older people find it difficult to walk a long distance, some of them, without sitting down. And I know a neighbour who's got Parkinson's has to sit down after every few hundred yards. So I think we should actually be encouraging a proliferation of benches. You know, obviously it's got to be in the right place and not blocking pavements and all the rest of it, but for people to be able to rest when they aren't very mobile. So I think we need to consider that as well. So, and I'm fully in agreement with what Councillor Strawn was saying, that if we're charging a large amount of money up front, that should be it. And we rely on our own skills in-house and on our insurance to take things forward. So I'm sorry, you know, obviously we want to get this policy in place, but I think we should, whatever the word is, not adjourn, my brain's defer, thank you, to defer it to another meeting.
Okay. Is there, okay, thank you. Is there anybody perhaps who would be, from a member's perspective, interested in helping to take some of these points forward? I know there's been some, it's a passionate topic that a lot of people have come forward with. It is a TCM matter. Councillor Knight.
I wonder if we can have a quick informal Zoom call, maybe some lunchtime, in half an hour, just go through this with interested members and see if we can finalise a draft to bring to the next council, please.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think this is a million miles off. It's just some very specifics in there. Okay. Are there any last comments? No. So the proposal is to defer, but we'll have a quick, hopefully lunchtime Zoom call, half an hour, and then this will be ready for the next council. All those in favour of that proposal, please show. That's carried. Thank you. And thank you for the work on this. Eventually, when we get policies like this in place, it will be less time consuming to get benches where they need to be, believe it or not. So no, that's fine. Thank you, Isaac. Item 10, planning applications. 10A, number 1, Rowlett's View, first floor rear extension. Any comments? Move it subject to neighbours and our usual wording? Yep, is that all right? 10B, 8 High Street, internally illuminated sign, various other signage related things. I think that this is pizza, this is Papa John's Pizza. Councillor Knight, did you want to speak on this?
So I think this looks awful. There have been some conversations between the applicant and Central Beds, and I understand they were asked to turn the lights off for a while when they first turned them on because they didn't have planning permission. They've subsequently turned them back on, having sought retrospective planning permission. So looking at design guidance from Central Bedfordshire, So this is the design principles for advertising and signage, fascia signs and lettering. And I'll abbreviate it slightly, but it essentially says that on traditional buildings or new buildings in sensitive areas, such as within conservation areas, and this building is within Biggleswade's conservation area, internally illuminated fascias and projecting signs are out of character and will be resisted. So that's very clear Central Bed's design principles and guidance. So I would like to propose that we object to this application on the basis that it's out of character, visually disruptive to the street scene and inconsistent with the CBC design principles.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Yes, various seconders. Comments, Councillor Alban?
Yeah, so the officers' reports on this, there were a couple, can't remember. One was from public safety, I think, and then I can't remember what the other one was. But this applies to the next one as well. There's no comments from any CBC officers about the conservation area at all. I find that pretty disappointing that they haven't even considered it, seemingly. So I think it'd be nice to feed that back, that we would expect some sort of consideration of the conservation area, the rules of the conservation area in their deliberations.
Thank you. Are you happy to add that, Councillor Knight? In fact, I'm sure there's ways of, and we have in the past actually copied officers at Central Beds, perhaps those who haven't, who are yet to comment on it. Perhaps that's an option. I know we certainly did that for Land North, those officers who we thought would take a particular interest in it. Councillor Knight.
Would it be appropriate to write to the conservation officer as well in that case?
Okay, so you include this, so include the conservation officer and make sure this is forwarded to them. Thank you. Any further comments? No. If I might just say from the chair, perhaps if officers are minded to recommend this for approval, is this the sort of thing that we should be looking to call into DMC? Is that fair? If I'm not speaking out of turn, I'm seeing a few nods. Councillor Knight.
I would agree, given the very specific location of this building, which is at a very important junction and it's very much one of the first buildings that you see, and you can't miss it when the lights are on. I think it's a gateway location, so I think it is important that we try to ensure it isn't allowed to continue in the form it currently is.
It's a pretty tacky first impression, isn't it, of the town centre? Okay, so we have a clear proposal. Any last comments? No. All those in favour of the proposal, please show. That is everybody. Thank you, except Councillor Bond, who doesn't vote on these things. 10C, 17 Market Square, retrospective illuminated fascia sign and illuminated projecting sign. What is this one? 17. What building is this?
It's
just remind me.
Pilates.
Oh, Pili Pilates. That's it. Oh, Councillor Alban, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I think the same applies. I mean, visually, this doesn't look quite so bad to me, but it's again, most of the other properties in the town centre have conformed to the rules, and they don't have illuminated, internally illuminated signage. This one does. I don't see why anybody should get away with flouting those rules. So I would move that we object.
And that's an objection based on the same, essentially exactly the same entry that Councillor Knight wrote for the one above. Okay, is there a seconder for that proposal? Yes, unsurprisingly. Any further comments? No. All those in favour of objecting on those grounds, please show. That's everybody. 10E, 10D, 27 Sun Street. This is a 6'6" fence along the boundary of a property where it meets the public footpath of both Sun Street and Fairfield Road. Any comments on this? No. No objection, subject to neighbours and our usual wording. Councillor Russell?
I think it's right that we don't object. I just think it's quite sad to take out a hedge and put in the fence, because the hedge has been there a long while. It does screen the garden and it's greenery, isn't it?
Yeah. So is it still no objection, subject to neighbours and the appropriate wording? Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing nods. 10E, 220 London Road, proposed conversion of an existing bungalow with loft conversion to a 2-storey house, also with a loft conversion. Presumably it's a new loft. Comments? No objection. Councillor Alban? Subject to neighbours and unusual wording. Okay, any concern with that? No, so this is fine. Okay, noted, thank you. So no objection, subject to neighbours and unusual wording. Moving on. 10F. Land adjacent to Furston Hall Road, telecommunications mast, installation of a 22.5 metre high monopole supporting various things which help phones get signal. Ian Bond, Councillor Bond, sorry. Speaking in his capacity as a councillor, not anything else. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. I wouldn't normally comment on an application like this, but I've been involved for many years over this area regarding phone mast. Looking at my notes, it was 3 years ago, we had an application for a 15-metre mast, literally outside 102 Winston Crescent. And through that, telling you a long story of once upon a time, to come to the crux of it, the application was actually refused, but it got permission through default. But thankfully, the applicant then came back and said, actually, we don't want a 15-metre mast. We actually want a 20-metre mast there. So thankfully, they'd have had to go back to planning permission. And this time they realized they'd have struggled. And one of the locations they had considered, which was called location 8, it's amazing, it's in my head, was this triangle of land. So that everyone's aware of it, this triangle of land is classified, well, it used to many years ago be looked after by town council. And it was handed back to CBC. This land is also subject to a request by Hallam Land Management to purchase it from Central Beds. Now, what you need to do is read this application very carefully. And obviously I've been involved, I've been aware of this application, but I never saw the application until it came public. But what I must take my hat off to the applicant. It's very difficult to fight these things. You've got to realise that there are a lot of them go around Biggleswade, but you've got to try and actually influence the way it goes. And what the applicant's actually done is exactly what, and honestly, I think it's actually the best location they've chosen. They've chosen a location furthest away from people's houses. And that's the point about this mast. The mast we all know is needed. You know, 5G has very limited range and you do need you need these masts. To actually put it the furthest away from people's houses is actually, you know, it's what would have actually, if it come around here, this is what we've been asking if they put it in a different location, like 102 Winston Crescent. But this time, it's actually the furthest location. That's when I read with concern the request by the comment from Highways, which basically says that we should consider what effect this might have on the Hallam application. Actually, I have considered what effect this has on the Hallam application. And really, what I don't want to do is I don't think that we should be being encouraged to allow the applicant to move this mast, which is in the best location possible, away from various people's houses, closer to people's houses to satisfy Highways. Now, the applicant, I think, has done a reasonable job. Going back to Hallam Land Management, the idea of moving this mast a few metres away to Hallam have control of both sides of that road. If you look at their location plan for the 416 houses, they own both sides of the road. So really, as far as I'm concerned, if Highways say that it has to be a separation from the road by X number of metres, well and good. But it can be, Hallam have got in their gift to move Furston Hall Road a few metres to accommodate the Highways. But really, let's be honest about it. This is only due to servicing the mast. And how many times a year do you think there's actually going to be someone turning up to actually service this mast once it's built? You can probably count it on one hand. So I think the mast is needed. It will, by actually putting the mast on there, I can actually refer to a gentleman earlier who was worried about amenity space. But actually, in my opinion, if you actually put the mast on it, you're more likely to preserve the amenity place of that land because it makes it less attractive to developers. Now, what I would also say, obviously I shouldn't say this on behalf of Town Council, but I'm making a suggestion. I think that once the mast is built, I think we might want to consider to see how we can actually improve the amenity space in that area, because the mast is only going to take up a small amount of this land. So obviously, that's something we're going to have to consider at a later date. But personally, I would support this application, but I would definitely object to any possibility of moving the mast a few meters close to people's houses. It is the best location possible. Definitely not like against 102 Mincent Crescent when the poor man was faced with a massive mast right next to it. So I think on balance, I think we should recommend approval subject to neighbours.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. So is there a seconder for that proposal? There is a seconder. So just to be clear, this is a planning application which we consider on its own merits. The proposal is no objection subject to neighbours, but making clear that the town council believes that this is a good location because it will give the signal improvements required, but it is as reasonably far away from properties as it can be on this specific part of that parcel of land. Is that a fair summary of the proposal? It is. Comments?
It is, yes.
Councillor Brown.
That's a powerful argument you use, and I can see the merits of it in the bigger picture, and certainly in opposing the development. But I am totally against this mast being placed there. This is not the most affluent area of Biggleswade, and I frequently go through that area and see children playing on that area in the summer. I've seen kites flying, I've seen little cars, remote control cars. I'm frequently seeing people using that space, and it is the only green space there. And I know you mentioned preserving it, but it's like saying let's put a mast in the cemetery to preserve it, and no one will come near it then. No, this is a place, a green area that children use, and all our policies, everything we do in terms of parkland has been focused on that, trying to make, preserve and look after the great green spaces we've got in Biggleswade. This isn't a great green space, but it's a much used one, unlike the one you mentioned earlier. And I think the people in that locality use it. We've heard today that residents are not happy about it. And as a representative of people who are using that space, I think we should all think seriously about opposing it. Maybe even asking, can they purchase land further north, 10 metres north, because the mast is needed.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. So I think it's odd to consider the Hallam application when considering this application. I thought each application should be considered independently on its merits and not presuppose that the outcome of another independent application that hasn't been considered. Hallam may never happen. I mean, that site has had a troubled past with unauthorised travellers. So quite regularly there are encampments there, and then it's not usable by anyone for a while. And I do wonder if the mast there may deter travellers from using that site. Of course, I would prefer it to be invisible. We haven't developed that technology yet. Councillor Brown makes a good point about it not being one of the most affluent parts of our town. But in considering that, I consider that actually having good 5G coverage is a way to help level up that part of this town, in that people may then have the choice of using a mobile phone and not having to have a broadband connection at home, because indeed their mobile phone will be at wired speeds. It will run at hundreds of megabits per second, which could save people £20 or £30 a month in some cases. So I think investing in good 5G infrastructure is important. And I'm in some ways quite glad to see an area that you could argue is deprived is going to get the benefit of that coverage. I think it's the best location we are going to get, and I think it's the best way of protecting that site. So it's not perfect, but I don't think we should make perfect the enemy of the good, to use a cliche, and that's why I'm going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Councillor Strawn.
Yes, it may not be perfect in every respect, but there is a substantial area of land there anyway. It's not all going to be used up, so hopefully the mast will only take a small part of that away. and possibly there can be some proper amenity land actually designated there rather than, I think it's currently fairly informal kind of amenity land. And if the mast isn't there, has one considered what will happen if there is development to the north of Biggleswade? That land will probably be used for other purposes other than amenity land, for housing, roads or whatever. So the amenity land could be lost in any event in the future. So I think that on balance, it may not be the most perfect site, but I doubt whether we'll ever will find one. So on balance, I think it's better that we support the application as it stands rather than vote against it.
Thank you. Councillor Bond, do you want to briefly summarise and we'll look to move to propose?
I'm not going to change what I've said, but all I'm going to say is I'd like to reassure Councillor Brown because he asked about would it be possible to move it 10 metres north. I received a lot of information 3 years ago when we looked at when we were opposing the mast in Winston Crescent, and the applicant tried several sites around Biggleswade, including the land north of the triangle. The landowner, for obvious reasons, objected to it, and actually, even at the time, Central Beds objected to it, but Central Beds at least are listening to it now because it's actually on Central Beds land. But the Hanham Land Management, they objected to the actual mast before, and I'm happy to share a whole lot of list of all the areas they looked into for signal strength, keeping away from people's houses. There were a lot of things were assessed. This wasn't done on a fag packet. This was done a very careful exercise. And I said, as Councillor Strawn says, I think on balance, this is the best location, and what's been said before as well is we should treat each application on merit. And what I really oppose to is trying to move this mast close to people's houses. And actually, my personal opinion is, but the mast will actually more likely secure this land rather than the possibility of losing it in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, just if the mast goes ahead, or even if it doesn't, it would be nice this isn't a planning thing. It'd be nice to see if this town council can look to improving, maybe going back to managing that land and improving that amenity for the local area.
Yeah, let's see perhaps after the outcome of this planning application, that's perhaps something that can come to a future council. Okay, we have a proposal. The proposal is no objection, subject to consultation with neighbours, but stressing that the town council is of the view that this is the best location for important investment in 5G, but also stressing that the location is the best one because it is as far as possible from houses, whilst also giving the benefits that 5G will give. Is that fair? All those in favour of that proposal, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. It's carried. 10G, 43 Shortmead Street, works to a tree within the conservation area, prune back overhanging branches of a willow tree. Any comments? Note it. Note it. Thank you. Item 11, planning application outcomes. So this is a report as of the 1st of March. Any comments on these? No, are we noting these? We might just note, if I might just say from the chair, and this is not, forgive me, a criticism of anybody who puts this report together, but it seems to be a report of things awaiting decisions. And I don't know that it's changed huge amounts month on month. So I think we need to give a little bit of thought to what we actually consider in this report. To my mind, it should probably be things that we object to. Are they approved, or do they uphold the objection? But perhaps that's something that we can discuss operationally, because it's quite a lot of content there, but we can perhaps discuss that offline. So we're okay to note 11. Item 12, accounts. Financial administration. So we've got the balance sheet, detailed income and expenditure, payment listing and summary income and expenditure. Any comments on these? I think we're being asked to accept the accounts. I know Councillor Pullinger's not here, so does anyone want to put their head above the parapet? Councillor Foster?
I think they're fairly straightforward. I guess in the absence of Councillor Pullinger, I just asked that we adopt the February accounts as laid out.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Any comments? No. All those in favour of adopting the accounts as laid out? Thank you, that's carried. Items for information for members to receive a written report on the contracts database report. Any comments on this? Is there anything to add on it first, Karim, or not?
No, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any comments on this? No. So we're okay to note the contents of this. Thank you for putting some of this in writing. I know there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes about refreshing some of these contracts, so the update is gratefully received. 13B, internal audit interim report for members to receive a written report from the finance manager. Rob, is there anything to update on this or not? No, not really. Okay. I presume that's a not at all. Okay. Any comments on this? Councillor Russell?
Just to say that it's like a lot of our internal audit reports, and with nothing to note, and they're the best words we can see on this. And thank you again to staff for doing what they do.
Thank you. Yes, it's a strong confirmation of our processes and control environment. Councillor Strawn, did you want to comment?
Yes, just an observation. We had our AGAR report last year, which had raised more issues than I can ever remember seeing raised before in an AGAR report. I just hope that this report means that all those issues that were raised have been dealt with satisfactorily. It doesn't make any references to that, but there were issues raised in the AGAR report last year that were I haven't seen that comments like that in the previous AGAR reports.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. I don't know the scope of the audits, the relative scope of them, but that is something that will probably need to come back to, that council could check in on progress on anyway. Councillor Russell?
Just going to say, I think we've already been told by the clerk that all those issues have been addressed, so I don't think there's an issue to worry about there.
Fine, thank you. So we're okay to note the interim report, is that okay? Note it. 13C, minutes of the community engagement group. For members to receive the minutes of the community engagement group. Sorry, it says the same thing. Any comments on this? Note it. 13D, minutes of the allotment meeting. For members to receive the minutes of the allotment meeting, which was held on the 23rd of February. Comments? Note it.
Note it.
Note it. Item 13E, Good Friday Parade. For members to receive correspondence from the Biggleswade Baptist Church. Any comments on the Good Friday Parade? Councillor Russell?
Just to say that this happens every year and it seems as if it's under control. So I think we should just note it.
Thank you. Note it. Note it. Okay, thank you. 13F, planning application, potential breach. For members to receive information regarding the planning application decision, which I can't actually click on that hyperlink, but I think this is to do with Caprino's Pizza. Oh, sorry, it's actually printed out, isn't it? So are there any comments on this? I don't think we're quite at the point where we know that there's been a breach. I know there's a lot going on in the background related to this, and the town council has expressed a view on it. So is there any, are we okay to note this, Councillor Knight?
I understand the franchisee has delayed the opening a little bit while they investigate some of the concerns that have been raised, but I suggest for this evening we just note it.
Note it. Okay, Councillor Strawn.
Just an observation, if we have something like this in the future, perhaps the address of the property could be actually put on the heading to the agenda item. It just makes it a little bit clearer, as you just discovered when you were just saying about, is it Caprino's?
That's right. Yes, no, that's fine. Thank you. A good point, Councillor Strawn. Item 13G, closed bridal way for members to receive information from Central Bedfordshire Council. So this is related to, I'm sure it is is it the bridal way? I don't think we have bridal ways on the commons. It's related to the commons, isn't it?
The access to it is by bridle way. So
the access is via bridle way, but it is a footpath. Okay.
Well, I think it's actually a bridle way, leads onto the common when it ceases to be a.
Okay, I'm being unnecessarily pedantic. Are there any comments on this? I don't know what there is to say or do about it, but it looks like the Rights of Way officer has a lot of this in hand under potentially slightly difficult circumstances. Councillor, note it. Yeah. 13H, bike hire update for members to receive a report from the place shaping manager. We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Isaac, is there an update?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So since members agreed to proceed with the scheme, officers have engaged further with BRCC and CBC. They've collectively decided not to use the racks at the lakes for risk of vandalism and are now considering a small patch of land near Grasmere Road, Lincoln Crescent. They're also looking to use the existing town centre bicycle racks. Dan Albone, they're reconsidering, as they've noted that the existing stands are rarely used and that the site could be open to vandalism as it's out of view. And for Franklin's Recreation Ground, they're still looking to go ahead, but keeping a close eye due to vandalism. They're asking that no press and social comms should go out until all locations have been firmly committed to, and officers will continue to engage with BRCC and CBC.
Okay, thank you. This seems quite important because there was a proper decision of council about where these should go. And it now seems like there are essentially new proposals from BRCC. So given that this was an oral update, if I might say from the chair, perhaps we don't dwell on this too much this evening, but bring this back as a proper decision for council to make at our next council meeting, simply because we can't overrule a decision of council, unless we want to do so off the back of an oral report, but it's up to members. Any comments? Councillor Russell? I'm just concerned that some locations are being ruled out because of possible vandalism, but they're actually very good locations from the point of view of what we were told was trying to be achieved at the council meeting. And I think you're right that we need to look at this properly, because we did make a formal decision based on the facts in front of us. And I think we need it to come back to council. I mean, it's interesting because we shouldn't make a contra decision within 6 months. So we'll have to go through whatever process is required to be able to make a contra decision, if that's what turns out to be. So I think, you know, we need to have something clearer about what this is about. Thank you. So are we okay to, are there any further comments? Now, do we note this for now and ask that this comes back to council, bearing in mind what standing orders may or may not say about coming to another decision that may contradict one that we've already made? Is that fair? Councillor Strawn?
By way of a written report, I think.
By way of a written report, yes, of course. Okay, so we're noting this, but hoping that this comes back. Is that okay? Thank you very much for that update, Isaac. We wouldn't have wanted to start seeing this very important infrastructure just popping up all over the town. So thank you for that. 14, public open session to adjourn for a period of up to 15 minutes to allow members of the public to put questions or to address the council through the chairman into respect of any business of the council. Each speaker will give their name and have 1 3-minute slot. Our original speaker has disappeared. Do we have anybody online? One person. If they wish to address the council, could you show your electronic hand? They're not showing an electronic hand, so we'll move on. Item 15, exempt items. So members, it's advisable that we move into exempt session to discuss a few things. So you can see them laid out in front of you. Is somebody content